You're listening to What's Contemporary Now, a show about culture and the people, places, and things that together make it up.
This episode is brought to you by Nespresso and Samra Origins by the Weekend Coffee Collection.
Introducing Samra Origins. My collaboration with Nespresso is a connection to my roots, to my mother, Samra. Coffee that hits the right notes. It transports you. Crafted with unique notes and bold, soaring flavors. Experience a taste that moves you. Nespresso and Samra Origins.
Discover more at Nespresso.com.
With some of the guests that come on this show, we're meeting for the first time mere minutes before starting to record. Such was the case with Fear of God founder and creative director Jerry Lorenzo. This man has something impossibly grounded going on, a kind of conviction and clarity around both his identity and purpose that really draws you in. We spoke about the recent move into womenswear, the intentionality behind the brand, and how he manages both the business and his creative process. But it was his conviction, purpose, and grace that I walked away the most intrigued by. He's definitely where he is at any given time and had that level of presence that somehow made sudden sense of the way one feels when wearing his clothes.
This is Jerry Lorenzo, and we're talking about what's contemporary now.
Jerry Lorenzo, thank you again for joining us. I'm super stoked that we're starting the season with you and keen to dive into the beginning, because if you've listened to the show, we always try to dig up those stories you can't always find online. So let's talk about the early formative experiences of your childhood and all the ways that sort of set you upon the path you tread today.
I guess anyone's formative childhood experiences start with what you have access to. For me, I think being of color and living in a community that was different than my color, how I presented myself, what I wore, instinctively I knew had a different weight to it than what others had the luxury to wear around me. And so in putting clothes on in the morning, you learn to do the best with what you have and to communicate a certain level of dignity independent of what you have access to. My dad was a professional baseball player. We were a check-to-check family. Couldn't afford Jordans as a kid. I remember starting the first day of school, moving to Florida in 5th grade with holes in my airwalks and missing a button and really only having a few things to put together to present myself. And I think for me, I've instinctively always had a very clear understanding of the way that I present myself and how that affects the rooms that I walk into or are not allowed into through my day-to-day life.
But it's not like you started with this idea in your head that you wanted to pursue a career in fashion.
Yeah, no, I never even wanted to be in fashion. I just wanted to, again, have a solution to present myself to get through life. But I guess in answering your question, I say that to say that we all get up in the morning every day and make a decision on how we present ourselves. And I think through that process, if clothing is what anyone wants to do, we have a lifetime of experience in doing that. We all do. And I think for me, it was just taking account of what is this perspective and having an opinion on clothing you directly pull from your perspective. And for me, it was hard for me to find how I wanted to present myself in the marketplace. And so I instinctively had a conviction of what I felt was missing and that others wanted because I couldn't find it. And so from working retail in undergrad through working retail and during grad school and going to grad school to get my master's in business, thinking I was going to use that to work in sports, not realizing my part-time was going to become my full-time. I was better at retail than I was at accounting and statistics and everything else we learned, finance and business school. And fast forward, I just really believe that God uses everything for the purpose and plan and purpose that He's called and intended for your life. I look back at all of my experiences and all the different cities that we were uprooted from, that I've been blessed to be able to use all that I've experienced and been exposed to that informs what I'm doing now in fashion.
I did want to ask you about the kind of frequency of moving around as much as you did during that period in your life and whether or not you felt like it was expansive and an opportunity for discovery, or was it disruptive to your childhood and what you craved in terms of consistency, or maybe it even shaped the way you frame things today?
It definitely shaped. However, it was extremely disruptive.
Mm-hmm.
I remember being at a historically Black college at Florida A&M, and my family had just moved to Chicago. And there was these clubs, right? There was the California Club. There was the South Florida, West Palm Beach Club. There was a Chicago Club. And I could have been a part of me, but not really a part of any of them. Although I went to high school in West Palm, I didn't have any relatives there once my family uprooted, right? And all of my family being in Northern California and Sacramento, but being far removed from that childhood experience to my immediate experience of Chicago, that I wasn't in the city long enough to be a part of that. It was always, hey, where are you from? It was this long story of, oh, well, my dad's in baseball. I lived here and traveled throughout the South in minor leagues, and never really felt like I had a home or had a place where I belonged or could call home or where I was really from. Fast forward today, I pull from all the cultural nuances of all the cities and places that we just grew up based on my dad traveling.
Before we jump into the world of fear of God, as you mentioned, your dad's background, your own work in retail earlier on, but later sports marketing, event promotion, talent management, all of these are very different spaces, audiences, and kind of work styles. But what was the initial catalyst where you decided that you were going to make that official jump into not only fashion, but founding Fear of God in the absence of any formal training?
The initial catalyst was I was throwing parties in LA. I was probably one of the most successful party promoters, had one of the most successful at the time party promotional companies. And a lot of the guys coming into the parties were streetwear brand owners, people from Supreme to Crooks and Castles, Diamond Supply, the Hundreds, all these different brands, and the Fairfax crew, call it, that were coming to our parties. Having a brand just felt extremely tangible to me. And I really felt narcissistically that, hey, I have a perspective that, in my opinion, is on the level of or different enough or cooler than my friends. And it just felt as if I instinctively knew what I wanted to say. And going downtown and being self-taught, it wasn't as insurmountable as a thought. It wasn't as heavy as a thought. If I look back at all the things I had to go through, and I knew that I probably would have never started. But I was so driven by a conviction of what I wanted to do that the mountains that I had to climb were just necessary next step to do what I felt called to do. That's how God works, is like he gives you a vision. He doesn't necessarily show you the steps. And sometimes those steps and those things that you have to go through can really deter you from your destiny, deter you from your calling. And so I felt like he had given me a vision, and I felt like that vision was tangible. Being somewhat of a stylist at the time, working in retail, having somewhat of a discretional income where I shopped a lot and I was just aware of what was missing. I knew how people wanted to feel when they shopped and what they were looking for from working retail for so long, that it all just felt very destined.
What role does something like an MBA play in that type of a journey? Because it's certainly not a common thing for a creative director to have. And I definitely think there's a kind of stereotype around that type of a person, which you don't fit. So how would you describe the kind of role that having an MBA played in the development of the business?
Unlike many creative directors, I'm a business owner. So it requires me to have a left and a right brain approach to everything that I'm doing. However, to your point, I don't use many of the tactical lessons from finance, accounting, business strategy, but I do use the hustle. I barely got into business school. I actually got into the integrated marketing communication school within business school and would have got a Master of Science in Marketing Communications. But if I got a 4.0 my first 2 years, they would move me to the MBA program because I didn't score high enough to get into the MBA program. And so the entire time of being in grad school, it was me pushing myself to limits that I had never pushed myself, studying longer and learning information and excelling in something that I really thought I wasn't qualified for. Literally, my test scores didn't qualify me for this. And so I'm in these classrooms under the impression that these kids are just innately smarter than me. And that process of pushing myself and graduating with a 4.0 and getting my MBA and being able to move to the MBA program, that hustle and pushing myself to places that I had never done before is what I take with me and what has helped inform my belief in myself and being able to understand parts about the business that are foreign or can seem overwhelming.
Did you grow up in a spiritual home, or was that something on your own journey?
Super spiritual. Grew up in a Christian home, and faith was always at the center of everything. My dad's career in baseball is a direct reflection of his faith. We watched him fast and pray for a week prior to interviewing with the White Sox for the job of the manager position in 1998. And he was a no-name big league coach. It wasn't like he was a Hall of Fame guy. It wasn't a job he was expected to get. Being African-American on top of it, watching him approach baseball through a spiritual lens on the way that he managed his teams. He was always studying Gandhi and Martin Luther King and reading the Bible. How do I lead and move men? Wasn't necessarily watching game film every night or studying stats. He was always looking at the intangibles and the intention of players. And I remember a reporter asking my dad, like, hey, I saw this guy hit a ground ball and he didn't run it out. Like, why didn't you yell at him when he got in the dugout? And my dad's like, I'm not worried about whether he ran the ground ball out or not. I'm concerned about the intention. Was he not hustling, or was he hurt, or why is he not running? That's my job as a manager. And he's always looking at a deeper reason as to what's moving externally. And I think I've taken that on with how I approach my team, with how I approach my craft, my work at a baseline. What is this intention? What are we trying to do? And what is the spirit in which we're approaching it?
Something you said in your conversation with Tim Blanks, who we love, of course, was around the idea of being internally focused, and that it's not necessarily this pursuit of external validation. And you think that's perhaps why the success has happened the way it does, because it is that kind of, I suppose, an internal locus of control, but also that deeper insight that you're referring to in terms of what you witnessed in your own father. And you said a few things that I thought were really something that kind of resonated with me personally, and I wanted to keep down for future use, which was that God drops in our spirit what it is that you're supposed to do. And the only way to materialize what he's given you is to stay in touch with him. And obviously the him might be a her or a universe or whatever someone wants to label that. But I thought it was such a really interesting way to view business, especially given that it's something that's actually present even in the name of the company. So were those things that were present in your awareness from the get? I'm assuming that was inherited from your upbringing.
Yes, it's present at the beginning, but it isn't necessarily revelatory until you start moving in it. You know that, hey, I'm doing this with an intention to answer the call in my life. And the responsibility is to carry out the specific task that you know you've been called to do. And when you are praised externally, it can potentially sidetrack you. At the very best, it encourages you. But when you do get the praise, it never fulfills you in the way that just doing what you're called to do and how that fulfills you. And so you receive the praise, and although it's encouraging, it's never going to scratch that thing or make you feel any better about doing what you're called to do other than simply just answering the call. There's a different level of peace and fulfillment in that. And so when your bank account grows, or with all of these other external things that could potentially redirect your intention, never feed your spirit in the way that just being in line with him does, it's easy to say, it's now revelatory to you that, oh, yes, this is why I'm doing it. All of these other things are amazing, but they're not hitting the why. Mm-hmm. And they're not strong enough to redirect why and the intention of what the company is doing. That can only come from being in alignment with the one who gave you the assignment. But if I know that my assignment is from above, why would I ever do another homework assignment? It's like that could never lead to any type of peace or anything that I can lay my head on. And I think for me, what I'm chasing is that alignment. What I'm chasing is that peace. And I can never know exactly what God wants to do through me, but I'm clear on what my assignment is. How my assignment affects his larger plan, I had no idea. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to act like I know, but I know I'm clear on what he's called me to do. And that's where I keep my focus.
It's all such a grounding perspective to hear, because I think specifically in this particular time in the culture, and then you dive deeper into this particular industry, and what a lot of people navigate is a great deal of uncertainty. And even the way fashion can become this sort of microcosm of life, in that you're constantly expected to reiterate and sustain interest or relevance. And it feels quite parallel with the demands of our own happiness, or in your words, the pursuit of peace, where there's that hedonic treadmill that we're always on. And we have this idea that it is based on a point of arrival when really it is that process. And so along the way, you need to find these anchors. Otherwise, you feel a little bit lost in the wind. You've obviously talked about how that's taken shape, not just through your upbringing, obviously the moments of realization throughout your career. But are there pieces of advice that you have or have shared with people as to how they can find their own version of that? Obviously, faith is one thing, but
That's all that I know. Faith is the thing. To me, there's not a bunch of anchors. There's one anchor. It's one anchor. I'm clear on my why. And I'm clear that God has given each and every one of us a unique perspective that we all only have. No human experience is the same. And if we all have access through algorithms and Chat GPT, Google, wherever we find our information, if we all have access to the same information, then what separates us? What gives you the edge? Your unique perspective that only you have on life. We all have that. And for me, how am I looking at this in a way that only I can? And that is always my answer. How am I approaching this collection in a way that only I can, with all of the different elements that have influenced me in my life? Does this look have a little bit of this? And how are all of those elements like one clear musical note?
Well, you have said the fear of God was born from a desire to create what you wished existed, which we've touched upon in a few different variables already. But has that mission changed over time, or do you still feel like you're designing for that same original absence?
Yeah, I think I'm still designing for that absence, because those solutions that I've proposed are only getting more dialed and getting better. And as my resources and as my craft gets better, what I'm putting into the world is not necessarily better, but maybe more clear. And I'm chasing that clarity. I'm chasing that simplicity through product, through design. And the solutions just continue to get better. But I 1,000% still believe that what we're attempting to propose does not exist. And there are many variations and forms of everything that we're creating. But is it exactly what we're saying? No. It can only come from this place. And my job is to continue to say what only I can say.
And you've recently made the very exciting decision to make a move into women's wear. Let's talk about that.
Amazing. Yeah. I think I've always wanted to move into women's wear. And that's a perfect example. There's some pieces that I just felt like my wife didn't have in her closet, right? And there's some pieces that I felt like other women didn't have access to. But that in and of itself, my first perspective on it, I can already see how much better that needs to be improved and how much more driven I am to continue to push in that space. But it came from the same place of, hey, I feel like this perspective doesn't exist in the world. Yeah, everything continues to be born from that same space. I think that could live through anything that we touch, whether it's women's wear, whether it's furniture, architecture. I think that same point of view, that same gift can materialize through all different products.
You guys have also done incredible collaborations already with the brand since having founded the whole thing. So it feels like a very palpable and established world that other people can tap into, or to your point, you can have various extensions, whether or not that's adding women's wear or other categories. It definitely feels like there's a sort of very solid nucleus to the entire thing. But even having spoken of fear of God as a reverence for something greater than the self, this idea of fear fascinates me at the base, because that can mean so many things in terms of our different relationships to fear. And so in the case of yourself, how does fear show up in your own life? Or is it more so a reference to that reverence that you have for God?
In terms of the intention of what the brand was founded on, it's a reverence for a higher purpose. However, we're living in times where you could see fear, whether it's the ICE raids that are happening, or whether it's freedom of speech that's getting quieted, or our history that's getting erased. You can see how fear can be used to prevent someone from purpose, to prevent someone from their calling, to prevent someone from being who God has called them to be. And I think fear in and of itself today has a very tangible meaning. I can look to share something on social and there's a fear that maybe didn't exist yesterday. And I want to express something or encourage someone, but there's this fear that maybe this will be taken the wrong way. And this hesitation, It's like sports. All you have to do is intimidate your opponent. If you intimidate them and you get them to play in a fearful place, then you have them, right? Because they're going to be a step slower. Or they're not going to play with a level of freedom, right? And so your whole game is to, how do I intimidate? How do I put them in fear so that they can't be as quick or respond or reactive to what I'm doing offensively? Like the absence of fear, right? Nina Simone, like that's freedom, right? And freedom is the essence of what's needed in order to move into what we're called to do. And I think today, the presence of fear is so tangible that it's that much more important to be tied to something that is beyond fear. And the only thing, in my opinion, that can transcend fear is God. And that foundation and that relationship in God is to know no fear anywhere else. Yeah, I think more than ever, a fear of God is necessary in order to move through these fearful times.
We always say that the internal world is the sort of genesis point of what is ultimately reflected in the outside world. And if you look at your design language, it's definitely something with that quiet restraint. Would you say that's an accurate depiction of your internal landscape?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a fearlessness to it. There's an authority and also a humility to it, right? And I think that is also this anchor that I'm always chasing, something that is so immovable, yet is so quiet.
You use the word sophisticated a lot, and I think there's almost something like monastic about some of the pieces that just make you feel incredibly, I don't know, I find your clothes very grounding in a way. It does make one wonder what that's reflecting in terms of your own psychology and the way the brand has evolved over time. Because like I said at the beginning before we hopped on, there's definitely that through line. If you look at the brand over the years and conversations that you've had since the beginning, but if you looked back at yourself from the start, what do you think you'd say to the version that you are sitting in front of now?
Keep going, man. Because to your point, the waters continue to be uncharted. The counterparts continue to be fewer and fewer. And sometimes you just need a little encouragement. Keep going, keep swimming. You know?
I guess that is a really great opportunity to actually ask you about challenge and which have been the biggest challenging moments throughout this time, because we, of course, only see the success, right?
Yeah. And then call it success. I measure success based on peace. That's when I consider what I'm doing successful, my level of peace, how my team is interacting with each other. Are we integrous as a company? Are we delivering on what we're promising? Like these are the things that to me determine whether what we're doing is successful. I don't think that a quantity of product in the marketplace or a number in your bank account can say, hey, this is a success. Are we simply doing what this was intended to do? Creating product that we intended to create? Is it living up to what we said we would do? And are we delivering? I think that's what success is. For me, the challenges continue to be, are we answering the call? And as our team continues to grow, the challenge continues to be making sure that everyone a part of this team is operating from the same spirit, is operating from the same intention. It's easy to maintain a culture of 2 or 3 people, of a group of 5 to 10, but you start to get into the 3 digits of team members and external team members, and that magic, which is culture, that majesty of all these things coming together is the hardest thing to maintain. This essence of who we are as a team. And that right now for me is a challenge in bringing on best in class professionals from different areas within the business, however, maintaining the spirit in which we approach things from the beginning. Obviously, the ways will change as our resources and our team gets better, but the spirit in which we approach things has to always be consistent. And so I think for me that those are the things from my seat as owner and founder, that challenges that kind of keep me up at night. How are we the best example of what our product is saying that we are as people?
You said before that you make a better teammate than a sort of MVP in the larger system of your business. And you've credited your father for having taught you about leadership, but I would assume that your relationship to that role has evolved over time.
Yeah, and it's much harder. It's a lot easier to be a great teammate when I was the last player on the team. You're required to, at the very least, be the best teammate, to bring people together. Although it may feel as if it's hard to lead from the back, it's actually easier because all you have to do is serve, be everywhere where you're needed. And being a servant leader is how I've been taught. And you want to aspire to follow someone that is leading from the back because inherently that's not their role. And you have a different respect for that perspective. However, someone that's out front that you are supposed to be following, to me, I find it a little bit harder to be the best teammate. And maybe I'm a tough judge on myself, but try to be in the weeds as much as I can with my team and to be the best tangible teammate. And at the same time, I sometimes lean on the fact that maybe just being an example of what the team needs to be is being a better teammate. And I struggle. To answer your question, I struggle with it. I'm not sure. And maybe it's because I can't answer that. Am I a good teammate? I think you'd have to ask my team, do they think I'm a good teammate? I don't know that I would have that answer.
I think it's interesting to see someone accomplish what you have and have such a clarity of vision that an entire world can be built on the back of that creativity, and then listen to you in conversations talk about being hesitant to call yourself a creative and juxtaposing creativity versus someone with a point of view. And I think that someone who's creative has a point of view. So what to you is the difference between those two things?
I think we're all creative. I think a mom that has to find a way to cut coupons and pay bills and buy groceries, and she's got to be creative with the funds and resources that she has. And I think being creative is just a requirement to exist. Am I creative in the sense that I have these gifts and talents of painting beautiful pictures, or I don't know. I think I'm very clear on what it is I want to say. My point of view is clear, and I think I do somewhat of a good job bringing in all these different influences from all different types of subcultures and things, that emotions that influence, and saying one singular thing. Maybe I'm good at that. And maybe the best thing about my seat is that I'm clear on the vision that I have for this company. Someone is clear on where they're going. It makes it a little easier to follow. It makes it a little easier for the team to get behind it and to help to paint that clear picture that the rest of the world sees. And so I think maybe one of my gifts is that I'm just clear. I'm clear on what I'm attempting to say. And I try to do it in the most obvious and simple way, through clothing, through footwear, bags, through anything that we touch, a level of clarity that I'm chasing in the design. And maybe that's where my gifts are versus, I don't know, being what people could consider creative.
In the context of creativity, or even something like managing a team, being a leader, emotional regulation, my guess is that there's very much a before and after sobriety, even if you weren't someone that ever had any sort of real problem. Can we talk about the ways you noticed the effects of sobriety showing up in your life once you had made that decision?
Yeah, for sure. I was sober for 6 years, and I started drinking again for another year and a half or so. Then I've been sober going on 2 years now again. And I think for me, it's so much clarity on myself all the time. I'm the same person all the time. And being the same person and that oneness in who you are, and it's not clouded by anything other than being tired or stressed or frustrated, that's the clarity. I'm just myself. I don't have to do anything that allows me to get to a different level or to run away from problems. And I think that's what sobriety has given me. It's given me the freedom to just be me at all times. It's not a prison, it's a freedom.
It's really interesting to hear different people's perspectives on it, because you've seen a huge shift in terms of culture's relationship to drinking alcohol, and a lot of people in creative industries making the decision to be sober. Again, not necessarily because there was any extreme problem, but because they decided that it just wasn't worth whatever recovery period or the way it affected their ability to self-regulate, or in some cases it took days before they could access that creative thinking again because they were just recalibrating their chemistry or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember saying to someone at an event during shows that I personally felt was very overwhelming. And I remember asking him how he could navigate that environment sober. And he went on to say at first it was weird, and then it just was better than it could have ever been drinking. And I just thought that was such a fascinating kind of perspective, because to your point of doing things to become something or to feel different or to avoid or whatever, I do think most people believe that even casual drinking takes off the edge or makes them a little bit more socially lubricated and at ease in certain environments. But at the end of the day, it sounds like a lot of people feel as though you actually access a deeper, more real version of yourself in its absence.
Yeah. And the reality is it's like you're drinking to take off an edge, to exist in a specific space in a different way. However, if the intention is not to exist in a space and the intention is just to be yourself, then you can be yourself in that space and it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
But if the space is more important than you being yourself, then you're going to do what you need to do to be in the space, right?
Yeah, well said.
How bad do I really want to be in this space? If the space is what's priority, then I need to do what I need to do to stay in the space. But if I know that being who I am is the most important thing in being in this space, then it's probably best that I don't drink. Or that whoever I come in contact with gets Jerry more than anything and not a version of. And I think that point is correct. But I think you have to look at, yes, drinking does help you to be in a space. But I don't know that's the most important thing.
So well said. Speaking of parties, let's look at the Met Gala, because obviously that was a huge event this year. And when discussing representation, you would express concern around things like tokenism or being the representative voice. And as someone selecting a guest list and curating visibility, how are you managing that sort of tension between self-expression, but also community representation?
Being of the community, you don't have to.
Mm-hmm.
You go in how you would go about it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have the weight of a fashion house that's not founded by someone of color being in an event that is about something that I'm not necessarily about. If the event is celebrating us and who we are, then we have the freedom to just walk in and be who we are. And that's literally what we did. This is acknowledging our perspective on style and fashion.
Mm-hmm.
That means we could just go in here and be who we are. And I think that's why maybe we didn't need to look at references of what dandyism is. We know the intention of that. The intention is exactly how we started this conversation is, how am I putting on something in elegance and sophistication, and how that materializes and what that looks like. The spectrum is huge.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really checking that emotional. Is this look giving this person that feeling? Has nothing to do with the cane or the proportion or the lapel, or is it giving this person that emotion?
Mm-hmm.
That was the checkbox. Does everyone at this table that's coming with us, are they approaching their work with the way we approach our work? It's literally that simple. And so we literally just did what we felt was best for the moment. And that was a blessing to be able to be in that space and have the freedom to say, this is just who we are and it's okay. And it's on theme.
You also said at the beginning of the conversation that you were aware of being in certain rooms. And we've also touched upon the general state of the world as far as politics and all of the other horrific things that we've witnessed. But do you feel like fashion's progress has remained linear?
I feel like fashion's progress is a reflection of the times.
So no, you think it has slipped a little bit?
I think it slipped a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, do you think it's linear in the way that we've retained the progress made?
No. I mean, diversity and inclusion is a trend. It's in. It's of the times, and let's reflect that. Now we're not talking about that. We're talking about sustainability. So let's reflect that. I think it purely is reflecting the conversations of the times.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that it's something so grounded that it is moving independent of how the world is moving. And to be honest, I can't think of one industry whose goal is commerce that is led by anything other than commerce and industry. And so if that's what it's led by, then anything else is just another conversation within how the business is moving, whether it's sustainability one day again, whether it's inclusion, like these are just conversations, but they're not the intention of what these businesses are.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can't expect them to champion something that was never built from that. My kids go to schools at private schools here in LA, and there's certain programs to get more diversity within the classes. And so when there's issues that come up within the school, talking to my wife, I'm like, why are we surprised? If this was founded in the beginning and was inclusive from the beginning, then they wouldn't need programs to bring in kids of other colors because it would just naturally be like that because that's who the school was. So when there are issues here, we shouldn't be surprised, whether it's inclusion or DEI, whatever you want to call it, because it's trying to rectify something that wasn't there. And if something wasn't there from the beginning, I think it really takes an extreme change of heart to shift what that is. And I believe fashion as an industry is built a little bit too much on perception than reality for it to really be about something that's as serious as that. The perception in fashion is more important. I hope that makes some type of sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. Think about marketing, right? Its entire foundation is the notion that perception is bigger than reality, and you deploy that in your favor when you're building a brand. And fashion, in all its growth models, is definitely predicated upon that. So I think what you're saying makes perfect sense. You've also talked about honesty, like when you crown honesty as beauty. That was something that I thought was a really beautiful way to put it. But back to the point of how you're describing the industry, there are very performative qualities in the world today in terms of how we move through everything. So what did you mean by crowning honesty as beauty?
I think something beautiful is something that moves you, something you can feel, right? When we watch a good movie and you might tear up because something moves you emotionally, it's hard to be moved by something that's not based on truth, authentic, that's not real. That's the essence of why it moves you. Because you can relate to it. You relate to the honesty of it and that visceral reaction to that, whether it's a tear or a smile or whatever. To me, that's what beauty is. And I just think there's something about truth and honesty and authenticity that is what beauty is. That's what it is. This person is honestly presenting themselves as the best version of who they are. That's beautiful.
Something I think of every time someone brings up the notion of authenticity is that I don't think a lot of people are disingenuous because of some ulterior motive. Sure, that's the case in some scenarios, but I think a lot of people struggle with authenticity because most people don't know who they are. If you go to South America or certain parts of Europe, people in a lot of cases are connecting via the heart. They're in the body. There's just such a different way of existing and moving through the world and interacting on a social level. And then you come to North America, and we're such a heady bunch, such a sort of analytical way of moving through things based on this idea of how we're being perceived.
I love the grace and the compassion and how you predicated that. It's not that people are trying to be pretentious. It's not that the intention is to fool people with how we present ourselves and what we're saying. It's just that really we don't know who we are. And it's just, man, that was beautifully said in the way you presented that. I think that's just reality. It's just kind of like what you're projecting isn't clear and isn't maybe as beautiful because of the confusion of where it's coming from, even though it may be beautiful.
Absolutely.
And maybe if you just projected that confusion, that would be way more beautiful. You know what I mean? That the honesty in that, not to say you're covering up that confusion, but yeah, like the reality is we don't know. Right. And so we're not projecting from this pure space, which then what we are projecting is clouded. It is separate from the essence of who we are. And again, that's why I think beauty is the essence of the honesty of what something is. That's beautiful.
Absolutely. Well, I love the idea of purpose over product, which is something you spoke about, right? Or like even purpose rather than just product. But what does that look like in practice for you when it comes to design and the way you want people to feel in your clothes?
Yeah, I think it's intention. Everything is approached with intention. Is this product doing what it was intended to do? And the intention of everything that we do, it may sound idealistic, but I want to make pieces and things that help people become the best version of who they are. Right. And so how is this blazer? How is this jacket doing this? How is this shoe doing that? How is this bag doing that? How is this freeing someone up to be who they're intended to be? And that's like the intention of the product, right? And so is the product fulfilling that purpose? And I love it when someone comes up to me, dude, I got this polo. It's like a fleece polo. And I love the way I feel in it. Forget how you look. You know what I mean? And yes, that's a part of it, but I love how I feel in this. And that's what I'm chasing. You know what I mean? I feel like me, whatever the day may bring. And that's the love that I'm trying to imbue and put in everything that we do.
It's certainly tangible, and I think you've succeeded. Do you feel like having become a father changed that in any way?
Yeah, becoming a father is why I started the brand. Became a father, and I quickly realized like I can't be a club promoter. What am I going to do that my kids could look up to and respect and honor and be proud of? And so I think my kids and my wife are at the foundation of my purpose.
That's incredible and beautifully said. You also built the brand without relying on kind of all the traditional sort of aspects in terms of how people structure things. Obviously, you had that incredible show at the Hollywood Bowl in 2023. Is that a format that we can expect to see again from Fear of God, especially now that you've made that jump into women's?
Yeah, maybe not a format, but I think something that sits outside of what's traditional is what you could continue to expect, for sure. How that materializes, we're still pen to paper on that and ideating on.
And moving into the last and final question that typically perplexes our guests, even though they all know it's coming. I wanted to ask Jerry Lorenzo what he thought was contemporary now.
Honesty in a time of misinformation, in a time of the fear that we spoke about. I think what's contemporary is being honest.
Bless. Thank you for your time and all of the honesty and the incredible conversation. I certainly enjoyed myself.
Yeah, me too, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of What's Contemporary Now. A special thanks to our producer, Sasha Grinblatt. Audio post-production by Chase Coughlin with original theme music by Joseph Topmiller and Chase Coughlin of The Black Soft. And visual design by Aaron Meager and Graham Prentice. Subscribe now to be the first to catch new episodes each week. And if you've enjoyed listening, we'd love to hear from you. Leave us a review and let us know your thoughts. Your feedback helps us improve and reach more listeners like you. Follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn for additional content and join the conversation. Let us know what you think is contemporary now.